Hello friends, today I want to share with you how I create custom oyster shell art with your photograph or art image. And this is a good example. I'm going to turn the camera around now and show you more. Next step in creating a custom oyster shell is to have the image printed on this custom paper. This is a very thin paper and I have the custom image of the St. Louis Cathedral printed on the paper. Then I choose an oyster shell that I think will be perfect to fit the image in. I cut the image in a square shape and I place it on the oyster shell to make sure all the points are going to fit. The next step is the decoupage process. I paint the inside of the shell white before I add any custom image. I use Mod Podge for the decoupage. This is our cutout image that we'll be decoupaging, and I will pour the glue, the decoupage medium, in here. So I'm ready to do the decoupage part. I like to use my fingers, and I just smear the decoupage medium, which is Mod Podge, all over the back of the oyster shell. Then I get the custom image and place it where it needs to be. And it's important to start at the top of the image and go down. And usually they have a little valley, and I just follow the valley all the way down and then go out from the sides with the Mod Podge. It might have a few wrinkles, but they're going to come out in the dry. It takes about 24 hours for this to dry, but this is the next step. You might have noticed that one of the steeples was a little bit crooked, so I straightened it up, but it still has some wrinkles, but that's the charm of the decoupage. So now I have created 4 of the custom image, and I like to work in batches. So these are all the other oyster shells that I'm working on. But I basically wanted to show you the custom image. It has to dry, and then we'll go on to the next step. So now the decoupage process is finished and it's dried for 24 hours. And I want you to notice how the wrinkles kind of dried out. So now the time is to clean up the edges. And I use a file you can get from your local hardware store. And sometimes the edges can be torn off like that, but you still need to get the fine points. And to do that, I use a file. I go all around the oyster shell dish and take off the little bits of paper. It's just a process. And you, as I said, you can pull off some of the bigger pieces, but you still need to get all the little pieces. And you just keep doing this until you have a clean edges on all around. And sometimes the paper doesn't come quite to the edge, and that'll be fine. So this is the next step, getting the edges clean. The next step is to add the gold leaf. I use this paint, Liquid Gold Leaf Classic Gold, and it's made by Plaid Enterprises, Liquid Gold Leaf. So the first part of the shell that I paint gold is the top part. And I actually start with the back and add gold leaf to the back. I leave part of the back natural so that people can see that it is actually a real oyster shell. So I paint about that much of the top of the back. And then I paint this part, the top. Each one is different, as these are all, and sometimes I go in this little dip to paint that gold also. Each one is different. And I'm going to add gold leaf here. But then I have learned to let this part dry before I try to do any more, so that it doesn't drip or run. So that's this next step. After the very top of the oyster shell is painted, both on the front and the back, I put it in a small tray and let it dry upside down like this, so that all the paint will not run. It takes 2 or 3 hours for it to dry. Okay, the next step is to paint the sides and the back of the sides. So I dip my brush, and now I'm going to be painting the just the side of the back, because I like to leave the center part natural, so that people can see that it's a real oyster shell. And now I'm going to paint the front edges. So I take my brush, I go a little bit at a time, and I make sure that I get all the areas. And sometimes this can come in a little bit. It's not just one stroke, it's a little bit at a time. I have found that it's easier. I come to the bottom, and now I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to put this in a tray and let this dry again, so I don't try to go all the way around. I just do one side at a time. So that's the next step. So now we're almost finished. I've painted the top, one side, and the back of one side. So it's time to do this side. So I'm going to start with the back. And this one has some interesting places, kind of some little hidden spots. And so it's important to get all of those. And I come around to where we stopped, about in the middle. And now we're going to paint this side. I'm going to come back up here and fill in this top area. And now I'm going to go on the side, and I just do a little bit at a time. I find that that's easier. And I like to kind of make not a straight line all the time. And again, I let this dry on the side so that the paint can flow this way and not run into the art. So this is the final step. I like to place oyster shell art on my bookshelf. And this is an example of the custom art that we do for the French antique store in New Orleans. This is from a photograph of the St. Louis Cathedral, and then that image was photoshopped so it would be blue and white, because they like the blue and white colors. I like to set it on an easel. Visit the French antique shop when you go to New Orleans. This is where these are headed.